Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the March 25th, 2025 meeting of the Escondido Planning Commission. If you can please rise and join me in saluting the flag. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we could get the roll call, please.
Yes. Chair Wilder.
Here.
Vice Chair Barber. Here. Commissioner Carell. Here. And Commissioner Macaro.
Here.
It's being a bit sensitive. I'm sorry about that. Commissioner Stevie.
Here.
Commissioner Spear.
Here.
And Commissioner Jester.
Here. Moving on to approval of the March 11th, 2025 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
We got a motion to approve by Vice Chair Barber, a second by Commissioner Carell. If we can vote.
Yes.
Are we doing that by?
Yes, so our system is now up and running, so you should all be able to vote from your screens on there. On the screen, if you click on Home Panel, it should bring up the voting screen that you are used to, and you can go ahead and go through that. If you're having any issues, please let me know, and I'll be able to help you out. All right.
All right, I guess we'll go ahead and do a voice
Yeah,
vote.
we can do the voice vote. No. It seems the system's not fully ready. So, Chair Weiler
Yes.
and Vice Chair Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner Carell,
Yes.
Commissioner Macaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Jester, Commissioner Stevie,
Yes.
and Commissioner Spear.
Abstain.
The vote is 5-0 to approve with 2 abstains.
Moving on to written communications. Any written communications,
None have been received. No.
oral communications,
None at this time.
public hearings? No public hearings this evening. We're going down to current business, which is a continuation of the downtown specific plan retail corridor. And our discussion this evening will be regarding the subcommittee. But I would like the chance for anyone that was not here, which would be Commissioner Spear, Commissioner Jester, if you have any questions or comments based on what you may have heard from last meeting. None?
I had the opportunity to listen to the conversation that was had, and I enjoyed very much hearing the comments and the vision that was presented. I'm grateful for Commissioner Stevie bringing it up. I thought the comments were great, and I think there's a real opportunity there. So I'm happy to just be a part of that discussion today.
Commissioner Jester, anything?
Yes, I also had an opportunity to hear Commissioner Stevie's presentation last week, and it was very well done. And I think he brought up some very valid points. And like Commissioner Spear, I think there's a real opportunity there. It is definitely not without its challenges, but I'm sure this is not the format to discuss those.
Okay, moving on. Anyone else have any comments right now before we go into the committee discussion? None? So the way this kind of works is, as chair, I have the authority to appoint committee members. And however, what I would like to do is look for volunteers first. We can have 2 up to 3 committee members. So who would like to be a part of the subcommittee?
I would.
Okay, we've got Commissioner Maccaro, Commissioner Jester, Commissioner Stevie.
I would as well.
Okay, now we got 4 people that would like to be.
Okay, well then.
All right, Commissioner Jester will back off, and we'll go with, unless anybody else has any discussion, we'll go with Commissioner Spear, Commissioner Maccaro, and Commissioner Stevie as our committee members. And I think what we will do is, if we could, at the next Planning Commission meeting, if we could just get a real quick overview from one of the 3 of you, kind of where you're at and where you see yourself going with this committee. It'll be up to you guys as the committee members to lead our discussion. I think we had voiced our issues and concerns at the last Planning Commission meeting. So at this point, it'll really be up to you 3 to go ahead and push this forward. And I think I'll leave it at that. If you have questions or concerns, we can have those answered by the city planner as far as how you want to take this.
Your mic. There we go. In terms of the expectation of this committee, in terms of timing, are you suggesting that by the next meeting we would be presenting, or we would be communicating as a committee with what our thoughts are in terms of timing of presenting?
Yeah, at this point, I think we just want to hear what your thoughts are and where you think this, kind of the direction you would like to take this, and then maybe some timing.
Okay.
By way of the city attorney, do we have to notice that on the next, place it on the agenda, I should say,
Yes.
that we're going to discuss this again, which would be getting an update, and at that meeting, we then could have discussion.
Yes, that's right. It should be an agenda item that'll be a report from the committee. I guess just a question for clarity. Do you want to name the committee, and do you want to give any parameters as to what the committee is initially, you as a board, committee is initially looking at, or do you want to just have the committee go forward and figure it out?
I mean, we can name it the downtown specific plan. There's probably one more word, subcommittee.
Can we just like name it after a meme coin or something ridiculous? Not that anybody would ever do such a thing.
You know what?
Doge is taken.
I tell you what, let's do this. Just come back with whatever name you want to have, and then we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
This may be for next meeting. Involvement, at some point, do we want to, and again, this may be premature, but do we want to involve the city council in the concept of what we're doing to get feedback prior to us beginning, or do we simply want to present to them after we're done? I'm just thinking there may be some advantage to having a precursor interaction with the city council.
Yeah, so, Commissioner Weiler, can I speak to that? So I have spoken to some members of City Council at a very high level about the fact that gave this presentation, and they have their own process they're following. They're very early on as well. But my sense is that for the next meeting, what we're being tasked to do is basically come up with the scope and objectives to present to you all and a name, which will be epic, and there will be a mascot. But that's where we're really going to, I think, dial in on exactly what this thing should be. At a high level, I think given that City Council has line of sight on the need to do this anyway, I think broadly we're kind of looking at doing discovery and due diligence maybe on their behalf in the final presentation that we give to them to be helpful in that way, would be my guess. But again, I think that's something we discuss.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think we kind of need to have the committee come up with exactly what Commissioner Stevie said, and then decide how best to proceed based on the committee's recommendation, and then us as a planning commission body. Any other questions, discussion? Okay. Anything more that you may need from us, city planner or the city engineer? Okay, very good. All right, we'll move on to the next item. And that is a discussion on the Planning Commission minutes protocol. That was something that Commissioner Spear had brought up at one of our previous meetings. And so at this point, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Spear to start your concerns and questions, and then we'll discuss as a Planning Commission.
Thank you. My concerns related to having a structural deficiency in the efficacy of our meeting minutes. And I'm going to point to a specific example where I think this has come out. Not that this is a unique example, but this is an example that I think has occurred more than a singular time. So if the commission will recall, it was our January 28th Planning Commission meeting where we dealt with an issue that was later going to be presented and voted on by the City Council as well. This was the interfaith CUP revision or change. During that discussion and our vote, we had, as a planning commission, a desire to communicate our thoughts to the council for their use, for their, to benefit them in the work they were going to do after we were done. The minutes to that discussion were approved. They were approved on February 25th, and they were approved because, in my opinion, they were very satisfactory to what we were trying to communicate to City Council. The commission discussion that was approved said commissioners discuss various aspects of the project, including the narrowed scope of the proposed bed use for detox programs only. Commissioner Spear voiced concern that the proposed project could draw those from outside the community instead of serving only Escondido residents. And then the key point, the majority of commissioners emphasized the desire to convey to council the recommendation to provide flexibility for the use of the beds without the need to modify the conditional use permit in the future. We had something very specific we wanted the council to hear. However, I'll refer to Councilmember Consuelo Martinez's comments during their deliberations. And this was on February 19th. She said this, quick question on the 6-1 vote from Planning Commission. What was the one vote, the one dissenting vote of concern, or the concern? Do you have it? It was a cold cut, it's a difficult response. What did they talk about? Well, it kind of catches staff off guard, of course. The answer was, I cannot speak directly to the commissioner's concern. The staff was put in a position to try to now all of a sudden regurgitate our whole thoughts on the spot, which was uncomfortable for staff. This is what Councilwoman Martinez says, okay, but they didn't share why? And there was some attempt at responding to that, but Martinez said, okay, thank you. I'm always curious about those. So here we have a situation where we wanted to communicate to the council information that we thought was relevant for their benefit. We had council members that wanted to hear what our opinions were, and yet that was not available because of our process. So I think our process is structurally flawed. My recommendation is we can fix that. We don't have to be in that situation. I propose that the staff, if we have a situation where we're going to be deliberating on something that later the council is deliberating on, that we don't wait through our normal process of approving our minutes and having them available after they're done voting. That we take that specific item, and in this case it was just a paragraph, and that be stated by staff during our meeting, we vote specifically and approve that statement in our meeting, and it be immediately available for council's use. Doesn't have to be all of our minutes. It just has to be in the circumstance where both the council and us are going to deliberate on the same topic, and we have something relevant, we want to share with them. So that's my recommendation. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, whether that's something that's that you share that same opinion on, or you have other ideas. But I would love to see us having that little snippet approved and ready for their use, available for their use.
Let me follow up with a question to City Attorney as far as the process that we actually have to go through before minutes are actually published. So certainly understand what you're saying is that gap. And probably more times than not, we don't have that short period of time between our meeting and when it goes to City Council, but I'm sure it does happen. But anyway, if we could at least get a quick overview of kind of the protocols and the process that we have to go through before minutes are published.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about this specific proposal because it's approving something that isn't exactly the minutes. I think what you're talking about is something slightly different than the minutes of the meeting. And the city clerk is actually the one, the entity that kind of handles the minutes, if I'm not mistaken, although Alex can jump in.
For the Planning Commission minutes, it's myself
Okay,
working
sorry.
with our Secretary, Veronica,
Okay.
City Planner.
Yeah, so in this specific instance, I know that the statement that was, that you just quoted from the minutes, I don't know if it was identical, but almost the identical idea was presented in the staff report for that item. And so the City Council did have that in front of them. I do understand what you're saying about the time differential. I think, the meeting minutes weren't approved. I'm not quite sure how you can get around that from a time perspective, to be honest, because I can look into what you could possibly do about that, but I'm not sure how you can approve minutes of a meeting when those minutes have to be drawn up by a clerk and drafted. You don't have that in front of you.
Yeah, I believe that the audio is available relatively quickly after our meeting. I don't know the timing because usually I don't look, and I don't know, maybe it's 3, 4, 5 days later. Do you know when those are actually published? Or not published, but it presented out in the public?
Yes, I can speak to that. We're recording right now, and right when we end, I'm going to be stopping the recording and providing it to our communications staff after this meeting. Typically, they're able to process that within the next day, and they're published on our website, which has a direct link to the YouTube account where these are uploaded.
Right, and I know that, and I've looked, and I think Commissioner Spear had looked as well. And I don't know, it was hard for us to find where it's actually in the website. And maybe it's when we're searching, we're going to one location that may be an old location versus, I don't know, an updated location. Because I'm able to find these on YouTube by doing a search. And sometimes it doesn't come to the top. You got to kind of, hunt and peck and search. So I found that. So maybe if there's some way, if you're able to find it quick, maybe just let us know. All right, don't go to this one, go to that one, and then we can at least see it. Point being is the city council has that opportunity to go there and listen. And if they're concerned about what Planning Commission has to say, they have that opportunity to actually listen to the audio. And granted, I've had some trouble listening to it, but the nice thing is there's a transcript button, so you can kind of read along, and granted, it doesn't say who's speaking. That's kind of why when we get into our discussions, I like to call on the planning commissioner before they speak for that very reason. So then anybody that's listening out in the public or the city council, they know who the comments are coming from. But anyway, that's kind of my summary on kind of how this works.
Follow-up question to what you stated there, because you said that in their minutes, I'm confused a little bit because this paragraph that I read wasn't there until we approved our minutes, correct?
Correct, but at that meeting, the commissioner specifically stated that you wanted to make sure that concept that you were talking about was was relayed to the city council. It was really important to the commission.
Yeah.
And so that concept did get put into the staff report. As I recall, Veronica, I don't know if you recall that specifically.
Yes. So Dare is correct that the commission, through a show of hands, informally voted to convey a sentiment to the council in an informal manner. That was all documented in the council staff report. So that was communicated along with generally what the concerns of discussion were by the commission. I think, Commissioner Spear, you're speaking specifically to the concern of the nay vote. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm speaking specifically to where Council Member Martinez said in her instance, it was what was the opinion behind the nay vote? She wanted to know why. And the response, on the cuff response was, I can't speak to that. And I didn't know what was in their packet, whether they had access. If they did have access to that, then that can be a vehicle to remedy this challenge, actually. If that's a possibility and it's been done, then we can do that specifically. We can say, hey, this is an asterisk, this is a highlight here. We'd like for this to be in their packet, if that's the mechanism.
I think that's the way to go,
Okay.
rather than trying to speed up some sort of minutes.
Right.
I think that's the way to go, is if there's something very important that you want to make sure the staff conveys, then you do that during the meeting. just
Okay.
like it's done. Yeah.
That, to me, seems like an answer of how it can be done, and it seems logistically painless, I would assume.
So-
Clear,
I'm
explicit
sorry, go ahead.
direction to staff is always incredibly helpful.
Okay.
So if during deliberations, the commission states, I want to make sure this is reflected in the city council's staff report, that literal statement can be very helpful to us to know, to specifically speak to that in the council staff report, which always has a planning commission summary. But we speak high level. So if there is a point, such as that point that was conveyed at that meeting, we then explicitly make sure to bring that up in that high level discussion.
I think that's fantastic. I would recommend that when we have a point like that we specifically want them to have, that we have that read back to us and we all give the nod that, yeah, that's what we meant, that we approve that, so to speak.
So it would be a consensus by the commission,
This
rather
is-
than
This is
opinion
us
by a
speaking,
specific
not
person.
an individual on the commission, but
But-
us as a commission.
But excuse me, but isn't that exactly what happened at that meeting? Didn't we reiterate exactly what we wanted conveyed and we voted on it?
Yes, that's exactly what we did.
So it happened.
Well, it happened. The
I
difference.
don't understand it.
No, the difference is that one of the council members obviously wasn't aware because she asked those questions. So she wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware that it was in their packet. I did see what was written in the approved minutes, and it was perfect. It was just what we said.
You were saying that she asked what was behind the one dissenting vote. That's different than what we all agreed to as a consensus that we asked staff to convey.
No,
So
no.
do you want, besides whatever's voted as the recommendation to the council? I had that problem last time. Do you want the dissenting vote to also be explained? If-
Well, I mean, it's speaking specifically to that or structurally to the whole thing. I mean, in that case, she was asking what the rationale was. That was actually given in the minutes, the summary in the minutes. It was actually given there. So I'm not sure that she was aware of that statement, because that statement, as we approved it, it was all there.
I'm not sure you could anticipate questions by the council
Sure.
with regard to discussions. It would be very difficult to do that. But I think the key thing that Commissioner Spear is bringing up here is that it is an agreed, a united idea that we want to convey. And I think that reading it back, during the discussion, this is what we want to convey, gives Veronica the clarity that she's probably looking for, and I think that'll solve the problem. I like it.
I'm going to throw out another idea, because we've done this in the past with other commissions, is as everything has, on a public hearing item, everything's been completed, and we're down to the final discussion right before a motion is made, or even after the motion is made, there's a second, and then there's the final discussion. I've seen this where we go right down the row on both sides and say, I'm going to support this, and I'm going to support it for the following reasons. Or I'm not going to support this, and I'm not going to support it for the following reasons. That way it's actually in the audio, and the city council and the public can then at least understand each and every commissioner's position on their vote. Now, that could be just not something that we need to place in our bylaws, but it could be something that we just do as a part of the natural discussion of this body. And, of course, that would be up to the chair to try and promote that sort of final reasoning for each commissioner's support or lack of support. Yes, Commissioner Jester.
I think we've done that in the past, to the certain extent that we've gone off on some rabbit trails and been shut down. So, it's a delicate line you have to walk with regard to, you know what I mean?
Can I suggest that I agree with you? I think what you're referring to, though, is we're done deliberating. We're done trying to convince everybody. We're not going to go down rabbit holes anymore. We're ready to vote now. And this is my position and why in really brief terms, and then move on to the next person.
Yeah, I think that's, and I know that that's what we've done in the past, that all of a sudden we're still there trying to convince everybody to go, a certain direction or not. I guess it's up to us as planning commissioner, and then, of course, by guidance of the chair, to make sure that at that point, we're done discussing, we're now at a point that we're going to have a vote. And it's just, now we all kind of have the same understanding that when we're at that point in the process here, that's it. There's, no more discussion. It's just, this is why I'm voting. I'm going to vote the way I vote. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of up to this body how we want to proceed. And if that's the way we want to proceed, certainly then the chair can make sure that we follow that protocol.
Maybe the chair can give a cue.
Yeah.
I think we've reached a point where we're ready to state our positions briefly and vote.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our cue to say, all right, let's keep it short. I don't know. It's a thought.
Yeah. I like it.
I think that's great. Because it does facilitate communication from each one of the commissioners rather than just a couple.
Okay.
And at least we can hear other opinions, what people may be thinking if it wasn't brought up in the general discussion.
Right. Is there anything in the bylaws or protocols that would prevent us from operating in that manner?
No, I think you're always.
Any
right.
objection from staff? Okay. Good discussion on that. Anything else that you wanted to have addressed?
I don't foresee us needed to do anything formally to do what we discussed. We've done it before, and apparently it's already worked. We just didn't know about it, so.
Yeah, and we can do it that way. There was one more thing, and it got me to thinking about when the vote is taken. And sure, if it's a unanimous yes or a unanimous no, that's easy. There doesn't need to be an identifier to the commissioners that were either, well, basically on I wouldn't say the losing end, but I'm going to say the losing end of the vote, that maybe when it's being read off that, okay, it was 4-2, and this commissioner and that commissioner voted no. Is that how we do this? Because I haven't gone back and listened to see if that's what the final voiceover is at the end of the vote.
I believe the final voiceover would typically be mine, calling for the actual vote report, and then we would move on to the next item.
Yeah, and so we would just name, the minority of the vote who voted, against the majority, I guess. At least then it's on the record. If, per se, when it comes to city council, when they get an item that comes before them, before the actual meetings or meeting minutes come out. Okay, that was it. Any other discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item 4, which is condition of approval definitions. Commissioner Spear, you wanted to have this item discussed.
Thank you. Similarly, there was a further discussion amongst the city council regarding the same topic, and it highlighted a challenge that we had in our deliberations in the Planning Commission that was also repeated in the City Council's discussions and their deliberations. And it had to do with everything was based on a definition in the CUP. And so, or the lack thereof, I should say. And policy and how policy is implemented was ambiguous or not carried out to expectations, or it was ambiguous based on the lack of a clear definition in the CUP. And that particular definition, so I guess the topic being when we have CUPs, I guess there's a burden at times to actually have things defined, terms defined. And when they're not defined, it creates confusion that translates into policy issues. And I'll give you the example specifically here. In the Planning Commission, it began with a discussion on what constitutes an Escondido resident. There was no definition of what that is. And so part of the discussion during the commission meeting was that carried over into Council Member Fitzgerald's confusion and her spending a whole bunch of time in the city council meeting trying to decipher what the definition of an Escondido resident was. She said, I pay attention to words, and she said, I looked at what California considers a resident is slightly more strict than what you described in speaking to the gentleman. Later, and she spent quite a bit of time referring back to the Planning Commission minutes that she reviewed, discussing the same item that, hey, this is what you said in that meeting regarding this definition, and then you said something different regarding this, and it doesn't look like the city has an official definition of what that means, so there's a lot of ambiguity in how that policy carries out. Later, Mayor White, he said this. He said, "We want to help those with ties to Escondido who are from Escondido, and I wholeheartedly stand by that. However, in this particular situation, I believe it still can be Escondido first." So that's relating to the policy and how prioritization of services were going to be administered to Escondido residents first or to others who is an Escondido resident. Goes back to the definition problem. And Council Member Martinez said this. She asked, is there a shared definition that the county uses? The providers use of what is a resident, or certain terms that are used for your CUP application? I think having a glossary of terms is important to make sure for data purposes that we're measuring outcomes on how successful these programs are. What should that be at the county level, at the regional level, all on the same page with definitions on how we talk about this issue? I don't know if that exists. So it was clear that, we have council members, we have commission discussion. They express earnest desire to have clear definitions in this case, specifically about what constitutes an Escondido resident. Why don't we have that? Is that something we should have? Obviously, it matters. It's mattered in the discussion. It matters in policy. So is that something, I think Councilmember Martinez's questions were really relevant. Who's going to take this up? Who's going to define this? Is the county, the regional, the city, the service provider? Nobody's defining it. Is it incumbent when we have a CUP to define the terms? I think it's responsibility of the city to define what the city thinks an Escondido resident is. So I don't know whether that is something that falls into, to us or to somebody else, but I think the city of Escondido needs to define the terms that are in the CUPs.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, but I think that it should be specific rather than having a universal set of definitions. It should be specific to the particular CUP and when the resolution is drafted, so that you have that encased within, because there's so many different terms that could be defined that are used within whatever approval the applicant is looking for.
I have a question, staff. I do not remember the conditional use permit that's under discussion ever referring to residents. Am I correct in my memory that residence was never mentioned in that conditional use permit? And if it wasn't, then there would be no reason for it to have to be defined.
So staff can't speak to whether the term resident actually comes up within the application materials of the CUP without going back and looking at those materials to confirm that. However, I recall that the applicant during their presentation made use of the term resident. So I think just in the applicant's presentation is, I know of a time when it did come up. For clarification purposes regarding existing definitions, for everyone's edification, the zoning code does codify definitions, general definitions that pertain to land use in the zoning code. Those are in Article 1 of the Escondido zoning code. Resident is not in there. However, I would like to just clarify that conditional use permits do in fact run with the land. So they are a entitlement that can be reused by subsequent operators or tenants for a use. So that is something to keep in mind when discussing definitions related to that use permit.
And I think to Veronica's point too, that there is a normal and customary use of a term that should give the preponderance of the meaning in determining what the definition of that term is.
Commissioner
Resident
Steve,
would be somebody who lives here.
right. Commissioner Stevie, hold on a second. Vice Chair Barber, a follow-up on your question there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm certain that resident was not included in the conditional use permits language. Even if the applicant referenced it, He might have been trying to use some preemptive arguments, knowing that residency was an issue brought up by at least one commissioner, and was the reason that one commissioner disagreed with the majority in the 6-1 vote to approve the conditional use permit. I disagree with, well, I'm going to add to what Mayor White said at that hearing, because what I remember Mayor White saying was, we can debate all we want on whether or not someone's a resident or whether they've been a long-term citizen originally in this community, but the reality is, the fact is, that they're here, they're on the streets, and we need to deal with that and fix that problem now and get them off the streets and into addiction recovery programs. That's what I recall the mayor saying. And I do know two city council persons continue to maintain that residency was a big issue to them, and that is why they voted against it. But the vote was 3-2. The majority of the city council voted that they didn't want to make a residency requirement for treatment, and it's proven. So I just see that process happened differently than the way you see it.
I'm sorry.
Hold on. What I don't want to do at this point is get into the specifics of that particular, I know that's kind of the premise of why we're discussing this right now, but I think it's a bigger concern, and I don't want to
That's fine.
rehash.
Okay, that's fine. I don't disagree with that.
Before we continue
Then
back
my
and
general
forth and
question
all
would
around
be,
on that,
what are examples where the city would want to restrict projects to existing residents? And number two, how are you going to verify the residency?
Well, I got a point of order question here. I'm really not clear on what we're being asked to do as a commission specifically. Like, are we being asked to create a glossary of terms that must be defined in a CUP? What are we doing?
hold on. And that's certainly a valid question. I think Commissioner Spear wanted to bring this to our attention, that there is a concern about definitions. Now, here's how I think about this. If we have a CUP that's coming before us, and one or multiple commissioners has an issue with how something is being defined, then can we not, city planner, can we not just insert that right into the CUP as, for this CUP, the definition of whatever is in question, this is the definition, unless it's so contrary to the definition of the same item that's in the municipal code. And let's just use this residency, because couldn't we say in the CUP residency means X, Y, and Z?
So the commission is able to place conditions of approval on entitlement requests before them as a part of their motion or decision-making. So if the commission felt it necessary to place a condition related to a definition of a term, that I think theoretically is possible. I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, I tell you what, it seems theoretically possible. So I think as we review projects in the future and this same concern kind of comes up, then, and we want to make sure it's extremely clear what residency means, that we put that in the conditional use permit. I think that's a valid way to handle this, unless the city attorney says, no, you can't do that.
No, I don't see any problem with what you just stated.
Okay. And maybe that will help solve this problem in the future. And then the city council, especially if it gets up to them, hey, they can say, nope, we're not doing that. And they'll just yank it. But at least at that point, they've been able to hear the concern and the reasoning behind placing a very specific definition on a certain item that's related just to that CUP.
So you're suggesting doing it on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
there's
I'm fine
general.
with that.
Yeah, there's general terms that we all kind of have to agree that's what it is. This happened to be one of those nuanced sort of things that it warranted the discussion, of course, but what we didn't do, we didn't take that one extra step. Just say, all right, we got it,
All right.
applicant, this is your definition, do we accept that? And we could have. Well, de facto we did, because we didn't say, nope, we're not going to accept your definition for that particular item. We accepted it, we approved it, and moved on.
That's fine. I'll cross each bridge as I approach it.
There we go.
All right, that's fine.
That's kind of how I see it. I would, because definitions, oh my gosh, we could have a Webster's dictionary full of definitions. So, I mean, the county has a definition, the state has a definition, the dictionary has a definition. So I think that if there is a concern, I think we place that directly in the CUP itself as these issues come up. That would be kind of my recommendation.
Thank you, King Solomon.
Okay, any more discussion on this?
No,
Commissioner Spear?
I appreciate the discussion. I'm very much in agreement with it. I felt like the amount of time that was spent, and it really is not isolated to this specific case or to rehash those issues. It was to point out the fact that, look, there was so much time spent partially in our meeting and after the fact in the city council's meeting around the ambiguity of a term. We should have had that in there. And we're going to have other items that come up as well, and we should be aware, hey, look, let's knock this out right now while we're dealing with it. If there's a relevant term to define, let's just define it. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? All right, good. So we'll move on to future agenda items. Any commissioners want to place anything on a future agenda? Seeing none? Any oral communications?
None further was received, no.
Any reports from planning commissioners? Seeing none? City planners report, future agendas.
Yes, so we will be holding an April 8th Planning Commission meeting. I know Commissioner Correll will not be present for that meeting. That is the meeting where we would normally have chair and vice chair selection. We will have an item on the agenda. It is an appeal of a notice and order to abate a public nuisance. We will have that stipulated out in the staff report published for that agenda as to why it is coming before the Planning Commission. If you are unable to attend on April 8th, please let me know. We are seeking quorum that day, so if you plan to not be here, it's important that we know. And we do intend to hold an April 22nd meeting at this point in time, but if that changes, you will receive an email from me.
Very good, thank you. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned.